What is up, everybody? Hoang Zero here, and today I have for you the long-awaited BT13 tier list. This BT13 tier list will be formulated based on all of our, experiences, and not only analyzing the Japanese format in of itself, but also a lot of the testing we've done in the last 2 weeks. We've done a lot of public testing as well, so if you're ever interested in coming to watch, be sure to swing by the Hoang Zero server and, come catch some gameplay. But without further ado, I am joined by a very special person. You've all been awaiting him. It is Zero. Zero is finally back with us. If you want to say anything to your waiting fans.
Hey everyone,
All right,
what's up?
and just like that, kick things right. Get right started. Shine Greymon. Shine Greymon is the big boogeyman from the Japanese format, right? This was the deck of the BT13 format. It was winning left and right. It was so powerful that even Bandai themselves recognized it to be an issue because they hit Marcus to 1 already in Ultimate Cup. So I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that this is automatically goes to tier 1, right? Based on like all the previous results and what's likely going to be the most played deck of the format. So I think Shine Greymon tier 1 is pretty straightforward. However, and here's the little catch. I think Shine Greymon's actually on the weaker end of tier 1 decks in the BT13 format. And the reason I say that is because, well, really, it's very fragile. It's very piece reliant because you need the whole line plus your 7 plus BT12 Marcus specifically. That combo can be very easily interrupted if you hit some kind of security bomb to kill your Shine. Not only that, but this is only a 5 damage combo, so you're not even killing your opponent. So now you get this really awkward situation where you don't have protection, and the clapback is very much so a real thing. And just a whole other slew of issues, but it's very fragile and very piece reliant. And in testing, that those weaknesses have really shown itself because it's been losing a lot to some of the other decks in the format. What do you think, James?
I agree. What I've noticed in this list, okay, so we had a number of like best deck in format that from Japan, right? Like a deck
Mm-hmm.
that dominated Japan and came up with English,
Right.
and the result tend to varies here and there. But the one thing that you notice from the deck that generally carry their performance level from Japan to English is that they have a high degree of consistency to
Mm-hmm.
draw power, right? I think Shine Greymon kind of lacks that. More than one occasion, I've seen this deck falls apart because it just doesn't draw enough, and it'll be missing like a specific piece. If all of your BT12 markets is like bottom 25 cards, you're in a lot of trouble because your ability to dig that deep isn't that good. It takes a while for you to get there.
Right.
So I've seen this deck just completely fall apart because it's just like missing like one very specific piece. I guess just because due to the color combination that you're playing and just don't have access to a huge amount of draws. Like you can dig a little bit with some of your pieces, but you have like what? You have like the Agumon that dig. And you have like I guess you can play Memory Boost, but Memory Boost would also bot deck your Tamer.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just it has draws, it's just not a huge amount of draws
Yeah, for
for a
sure.
deck that require some very specific pieces.
Right, and there is also the argument between red base and yellow base. Like if you go for red base, you do get access to Agumon X, which is really great for grabbing your Greymon pieces, but will of course bot deck your Marcuses. Then you have your yellow base, and yellow base does it lacks as much draw power, but the extra 1000 DP from the Koromon can come up when you're trying to break specific thresholds. So depending on the build that you're doing, consistency can also very much so change. But just in general, this deck wasn't as scary as I thought it would be. If anything, I've seen it struggle a lot into what is going to be what you and I both think is the actual tier 1, right? Or not actual tier 1, but like the other decks in tier 1, right? But moving on, we have Jasmine, and Jasmine is, of course, my favorite Digimon, a deck that I hold near and dear. It is finally come back. It has received a whole new wave of support. It's got a new 3, 4, 5, and 6. So, yeah, really excited for Jasmine to make its reappearance. Jasmine has gotten a whole slew of tools, right? So, obviously, it has DP protection because of Gankumon X. You have bounce protection, so if you play in a Mirage, well, that's handled. If you play into War Greymon style of decks or Black War Greymon, well, historically you beat them because you can just swing into their stack and you're swinging for a huge number, right? And if you say play into Hunters, which was one of your historically bad matchups, well, you now have access to Craniumon, and Craniumon makes it so you can't get tucked under by Superior Mode. And this combination of things is really great for Jasmine. Not only that, but your plays are so much cheaper because of all the memory gain, and we also have more ways to remove Floodgate. And these all sound like fantastic pros. So where does Jasmine rank? And I would say Jasmine, it's like tier 2 deck, TBH. And the reason I say that, despite saying all those amazing pros, is Jasmine still falls, victim to a couple of issues. Number one, its Belphamon matchup is very, very poor, right? So how the interaction ends up working out is, you have Jasmine, and, if you have Crania plus Jess X, you can actually swing into the Belphamon stack, which is really cool. But what ends up happening is you swing into it, and they have Ostamon in the source. Ostamon goes ahead and plays a blocker, and then it just blocks out the Jasmine swing, and then you get board wiped by a Rage Mode, plus Gift of Darkness on the following turn, and nobody really wants that, right? It's not very great. Not only that, but say if you play Mirage Galgamon, and Mirage Galgamon has BT13 Mock Galgamon, then they're going to be able to just basically ignore all of your blockers and just outright OTK you. If you don't draw into specifically Ganku X, you become susceptible to Shine. Really, the bane of everything is that you need very specific things to go in your favor, and sometimes it just doesn't happen, right? Because you are playing, quite a few breaks in this deck, right? You're playing so many sisters, and if you're a Jasmine player like I am, that's not too much of a hindrance. But also we have to acknowledge that to a certain degree that still is a deck building constraint that you can't really ignore, right? It's a doable one. It's not as bad as it looks on paper, but it's still a constraint that you have to acknowledge. And so, due to being susceptible to destruction based board wiping, ignoring blocker, all this other stuff, War Greymon even getting too big at times, I think Jasmine is a tier 2 deck. What do you think?
I think the one thing that does help this deck a little bit with the new support is that you still suffer from all of your inconsistency issue with grabbing pieces.
Right.
You're missing like specific level, but the new support allow you to climb really fast.
Yeah.
So if you're like a turn or two behind because you spend time digging, the new support actually helps a lot in getting you to your play, where as before you would not have been able to get to that play on the same turn. So it is nice in that sense. But realistically, do you think this deck beat anything in tier 1?
So if you see
anything that we were going to put in tier 1, you don't have to spoil what they are, but do you think it can beat any of them?
Yes, I actually think it beats a fair amount of them, interestingly enough.
Okay.
But I think the issue is, for all of that to go right, you need a couple of other things to fall into place, and it can be a little bit awkward. Just because if they happen to see their specific pieces, then your life gets a little bit harder, I would definitely say. Another thing that talking about those tier 1 decks is Ruin Mode. Ruin Mode can be very awkward because if your opponent goes into the Ruin Mode for the minus 10,000 DP, minus 5,000 DP, whatever it means, your Jasmine DP boost for your sisters only lasts until the end of your opponent's turn. So the moment that the turn passes and the Ruin Mode kicks in, well, your board's getting nuked. That's just the inevitable. If they also manage to keep turn and swing with the Ruin Mode, if you don't have Decoy Blanc, your GX actually is going to go down. So that's another really problematic thing that you're gonna have to acknowledge. And we didn't mention this actually, but with Shine Greymon, Burst Aggro is the more popular build that we have seen from Japan. But I think with the English format, this transition to best of 3, I actually do think we'll see more of a control build start to rise from Shine Greymon instead of this Ungam Bunga Marcus Punch aggro style of deck.
Start to rise. I see what you did there.
It's funny, huh? But yeah, that's my thoughts on Jasmine. I think if you take Jasmine into a tournament, I think you can do fairly well. I think it's very possible to get top 16 with this deck. I think you just have to be cautious about certain things. Like for example, Blim Lord is a really bad matchup, right? Historically,
Yeah,
Blim Lord being able to tap your blockers. They have Pomumon. They have a plethora of things that could be really problematic for you. So Blim Lord is a bit of an issue, even with the new floodgate removal.
you just need more to go right.
Right,
But
Blue Flare is a bad matchup because Blue Flare can stun out your entire board, and you're just
I
screaming.
I know this is your favorite Digimon, but
Yeah.
I would like to skip going through every single matchup for it.
Okay. Look, man. Like, if we were doing Galamon night, I would let you go through every matchup. But whatever, sure, fine.
Are you sure? You want to? I'll do it.
No, we're cool. All right. Do you want to take the next two?
Sure. All right. Next you have a public enemy number one for a lot of people.
Very true.
Security control. So this security control in Digimon has always been interesting, right? It's like a play style that just evolve organically over time. It's not something that I don't think they ever designed the game to have this kind of thing in place, but it's just something that the player base kind of created. And the way the deck works is that every time there's a new option or some sort of control mechanic, the deck gets better, right? But so to me, though, the problem with security control is I think the way that it plays the game has gotten progressively worse over time as the game developed because more decks now just have different way to play the games, and more decks now are just not as weak to security as they were before. I think a lot of decks these days recover really well against security, even if they don't have protection from losing their stack. So in that sense, I would probably put this in tier 3 because like on paper, what do you lose to? You lose to like Crossheart. You lose to you're not great into Hunters because Hunter can just chip you out. Um, I guess you're okay into Shine if you can get rid of the stack, and you're okay into Gal. But then you have like Black War Greymon and War Greymon with control, right? You auto lose to like BL, so I don't think it's possible for you to be like a BL's player that just see BL's X, right?
Yeah.
Course is difficult for you because it burns. Uh, Even the new Rosemon burns. It's just like you just have so many matchup. Like it's just really hard to justify bringing this deck because you just have so many decks that you just inherently not get into
Yeah,
these
and
days.
I definitely do agree to that point. Is that a lot of these matchups are not super great because they have uninteractable ways to play the game, right? Shine Greymon, for example, with Marcus Punch, if you don't kill the Marcus, it's just going to go back to being a tamer, and that's just something very difficult for you to deal with. Not only that, but they can establish it as a tamer, and then you can't interact with it, and then on the following turn they can swing out with it as a Digimon.
Yeah.
Decks like
The way that
Hunters.
would play
Oh, yeah.
this, yeah, the way that deck would play this matchup is they probably just don't even go for the shine stack, but they just start
Yeah.
chipping you out with Marcus, right?
Right. Decks like Hunters, deck like Bloom, like you mentioned, they have access to Quartz, and Quartzmon is such a powerful win condition because you just constantly burn them out. You have
Yeah,
decks.
you lock them out of the Mimi and all of these like
Right.
cards that give them efficient removal.
You have decks like Black Warg and Wargrave, and they have Yuya, and Yuya is just a huge blowout card versus
Oh yeah,
security control.
yeah.
So,
It's just like the time has passed. I think for security control to become prevalent as a tier 1 deck again, we either need like a Scorch or ban list that effectively hit all of these different playstyle that play around security, or we would need like see a drastic shift in game mechanic to where security is a huge determining factor again. Not that I mean, security is still kind of significant because you can still lose games to security. I just think that it's just less significant than it has ever been before.
okay, and then moving on to Blue Flare.
Blue Flare is so interesting as a deck, right? It has to me, Blue Flare has never been a contender for top 3 in the format. Even in sometimes we kind of I think sometimes we rated this deck a little bit too high, but in practice, realistically, it's always been hovering around like the 5th to 6th deck slot, and sometimes it dipped between that area. And the support in EX4 Igai is very good, but my issue I think with this deck is it didn't really get a new top end. I mean, you can play Kuzuha haha for like funny combo and stuff like that, but it didn't really get any new win condition, and
Hmm.
Greenmon is just kind of a terrible card. So it's weird in that sense that I this deck is kind of it got a little bit better, but I think everything else is just much better than it these days. It has some good matchups, but then you also have like it has some stuff that you should be good into on paper. Like I mean, it's great into Jasmine, right?
Right.
And in theory, it should have been good into Bloom, but Bloom have so many ways to answer you that that matchup is actually not that great in my opinion for the blue flare player.
Mm.
So I think it's like a very tier two deck. So I don't know what your thought on it is.
Yeah, so Blue Flare, like you said, it's a deck that hasn't had historically a lot of success. And to its credit, we haven't seen any tournament results with the EX4 support just because we haven't had any. Right, it's been Ultimate Cup format, and Ultimate Cup you have to deal with Machine Dramon and Beelzemon, which are two of its not so great matchups. But Blue Flare is a deck that I feel like it very much depends on the pilot, but it also depends on like the opponent and how they play into it. But if a deck, they try to like put out this aggro turn, and it doesn't like quite necessarily beat your opponent outright, then Blue Flare in those instances can just really shine. Being able to just keep a board stun blocked for turns on end, really. And it's those moments where Blue Flare demonstrates itself as a powerful deck, like as a powerful control deck, that not a lot of other decks can replicate, right? Like I would say, Blue Flare does a bit of a better job at controlling the board than Security Control does at this point, right? Being able to stun out multiple stacks, like if you commit to your play and then you don't have anything to follow up, that stack is done so, right? You're not swinging, you're not blocking, and it's only a matter of time before Blue Flare gets enough chip in to actually just win the game, right?
Yeah, I think realistically what Blue Flare needs as a deck is a card that give it value or punish your opponent for not playing stuff on board.
Yeah.
So it has similar problems to Gallant, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you can still play the game. Like you're not incredibly hurt by your opponent not playing stuff. Like you still play the game, but a lot of your really good cards just kind of require your opponent having a thing on board.
Right.
So either they need a card that forces your opponent to play something, or create a token, and that'd be maybe like an interesting route to go down.
So, what's interesting is, with Blue Flare, a lot of their cards are when you have two or more suspended Digimon, or not two or more Digimon, right? When your opponent has two or more Digimon, gain X benefit. And we've seen a lot of Japanese lists recently adapt 4 ST Red Greymon, right? Just to get the
Right.
free Sec Plus to
Mhm.
guarantee that damage goes in, right? So you can go ST Greymon plus Mailbird Dramon Jamming, Swing, and then Zeke Greymon Unsuspend. You don't get it for one memory, but three costs unsuspend, that's 4 damage, and then if you have the Blitz on top of that, like it's quite a bit of damage you can actually force through. So we've started to see this adaptation, and I'm hoping that maybe we can see that adaptation come to English as well. But enough about Blue Flare.
But
Oh, you on? Sorry.
yeah, yeah, I think that's enough about Blue Flare.
Yeah.
We'll move on.
Next we do have Venus Mons, aka like Venus Loop style of decks, like Four Great Dragons, Zophani, whatever you really want to
Yeah.
call it.
Venus Lock.
Yeah, Venus Lock, right? The thing about Venus Mon is it's a really fun deck, and it has a very interesting niche in the meta. The issue with the deck comes from the fact that it's not very consistent because the draw power in yellow is very limited until we get that new BT14 support where it gives us access to an entirely new toolbox. As of right now, your consistency tools are very limited. Not only that, but certain decks in the format have just ways to get around you. For example, Alphamon has Karada. Karadamon will be able to delete the Venusmon because it's via Tamer. Shine Greymon Ruin Mode is another example because Ruin Mode is end of attack, get the pop off. Not to mention Marcus. Marcus can swing, doesn't do damage, but it'll still get the Evo proc off. And there's a whole other slew of problematic things like that. Like Yggdrasil, for example. Yggdrasil can be a really problematic matchup, and I think just in general, Venus Lock, it was a lot better in EX4. It was one of the decks that picked up a lot of popularity towards the end of that format because a certain YouTuber posted a video. It was me, by the way. But going into BT13, I don't foresee this deck doing super stellar. It also has a... Wait, what's up? Yeah, the self-block. It also does really bad into War Greymon style of decks because of Raid. So, yeah, I think it's tier 3. Not sure if you want to add
Yeah.
anything to that.
No. I mean, I think it's tier 3 down.
Yeah. Okay, well, you're a hater, so that's cool. Next, we do have Blim Lord, and Blim Lord as a deck did receive a lot of new support thanks to its companion Rosemon, who happens to be a plant. And it's gotten a new searcher, it's gotten a ramp tool, it's gotten a free tamer player, new stun tools, new 7, like new tamer even. It's gotten it's gotten everything. It's got the whole package, right? Um, so you would think with all of this, plus all of his pre-existing support, being able to abuse Quartzmon, for example, that Bloom would finally, be tier 1 after like a long time. And there's an argument you can make actually that Bloom Lord is tier 1 in EX4, right? But I think Blim Lord does suffer from a fair amount of issues, however, in this format. Specifically, one, you automatically lose to Ruin Mode. And any deck that can abuse Ruin Modes like Shine, like Maste, Lilith Loop, anything really, puts you on a bit of a timer. The minus 10,000 will snipe majority of your board and they can just swing over the rest. Number two, Secret Rare Gallantmon is absolutely a curb stomper in this matchup because you have the ability to on play pop 6k or lower, on swing pop 6k or lower, and then it's 13k, so you swing over the Blim Lord, and it single-handedly removes 3 bodies by itself. So into Yggdrasil, that's automatically just like a GG go next, right? It's really rough. Then you have decks like Belphamon. Belphamon's going to board wipe you because Rage Mode plus Karada, well, that's an entire board wipe. Mirage Galgamon can dismantle your board. There's like a whole slew of things that just feels bad, but it's fine. Go on.
I want to add on to the point about Gallantmon,
Mm-hmm.
is that Gallantmon, being the way it's designed, means it's a very flex card that can see play in any number of decks, which is what we've seen from Japan. A number of random decks have flexed like 1 or 2 Gallantmon onto the list, right? As like hey, once I get enough certain amount of cards into trash, I can just slam this as a bomb, right?
Right.
So not only are now you exposed to the decks that naturally run that card and the decks that have like a lot of board removal, you're gonna randomly lose to some stupid random decks because they have a Gallantmon. It's just so funny. Like the fact that card exists just kind of whole Bloom playstyle.
Right, and to its credit, Blim Lord is still like the most proactive green deck we have, just because it doesn't rely on your opponent to play the game. So like even if your opponent hides and raising, you can still swing for 2 checks or 2 or 3 checks, right? You still amass a board of bodies and all this other cool stuff. So to its credit, it's still like a high tier 2 deck when you pop off. But the issue is like getting to that pop off. But anything that can abuse Quartz is usually pretty good, right?
Yeah.
Next we do have Dark Nightmon, and Dark Nightmon as a deck. Let's see. There's bounce in the format, and there's DP minus in the format, and suddenly I don't want to play Dark Knightmon anymore. That's super crazy, right? Into both of those mechanics, into Hunter's Tuck Under, into stun like green, like Rosemon Burst Mode, for example. Dark Knightmon feels really bad, so I'm just gonna go ahead and do us all a favor. It's a tier 3 deck. You can cope it, but you're probably gonna struggle a little bit.
I don't think you can cope it.
Yeah, and then
I think you're in a really bad time when you try to play this deck.
right, and then Mirage Galgamon. So Mirage Galgamon is a deck that picked up a lot of steam in the Japanese format. Right, it's a deck that almost started getting as many results as Shine did at a certain point. But this was, post training boost, which is not something we will have for the English format. Our training boost will come in BT13. So this is a training boost list Mirage Galgamon. So the question is, how good is this deck right now? And let me tell you, it's Melga light, but Melga's pretty good. And the difference between this and Melga is that this has an actual top end, unlike Melga. So this deck has a lot of pros going for it. Wait, what's up?
Calm down.
What?
Don't call it Melga Light, okay? First of all, this deck takes way longer to get going.
Right. I don't die on turn 2. Yeah.
You need more setup, and like, it doesn't. I don't feel like it has as much removal to the board. I think like this deck does suffer a little bit into decks with wider board if they have access to way to like. If you don't see your anti-redirect Galgamon, you actually struggle into whatchamacallit, Jasmine, right? Because of the amount of blockers. So I mean, like, calm down. Like,
so it's Melga Light. It's literally It's literally Melga Light, you know.
No, it's different dog deck, not
Bark
all
Bark
dog
Blue
decks.
Dog. They're all, you know, like it's a blue dog, you know. Um, But the thing about Mirage Galgamon, especially in testing, because we've been testing this for like the last 2 weeks, it's really good. It's probably one of like it's a very solid like OTK style of deck, but it doesn't only have to commit to the OTK. It has a lot of control elements. It can play super hard for tempo. It can amass quite a bit of board actually due to all the memory manipulation you have access to. It has a lot going for it.
It's
And
same combo pieces
yeah,
as Shine Greymon to kill
yeah. So
versus Shine, which only does 4 or 5 damage depending on.
exactly, right? So Shine Greymon, you need full line +7 plus Tamer. Well, so does Mirage Galgamon, and like James said, the difference is Mirage Galgamon will kill with that number of cards. Shine won't. So that's a really huge difference, and so that's
You also
why.
draw more. Your deck mechanic forces you to draw more.
Yeah,
Also,
albeit prior to the starting the combo, your only extra source of draw is BT4 Thomas. You know, keep that in mind. But still, yeah. One really interesting thing I did want to mention is that another thing that a lot of people, you know, don't tend to recognize with Galmon is the hand looping aspect of it, right? When you snipe a card from your opponent's hands, sometimes you just snipe their important combo piece, and then they just can't play the game
yeah,
afterward, right?
yeah. This deck like does what the Wraith One deck tried to do because it didn't
Yeah.
focus. It didn't focus on sniping hand. Like the sniping hand is just like a byproduct of you,
Mm-hmm.
like doing your stuff, like that, which is what it should be. So like it is good because like sometimes you, even if you don't kill, you get the benefit of sniping their hand. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's my rant.
Fantastic. I can't wait until we actually get to Ravemon, but yeah, Mirage Galgamon Burst Mode. It's in the running for best deck in the format, I would say. It can play offensive, defensive, tempo. Like it can really just do everything. It feels almost Swiss Army knife fish, you know.
Yeah,
But
it's good deck. It's best deck in format in my opinion.
do you think so? Okay.
Yeah.
And coming up next, we do have Phoenixmon. Phoenixmon did receive some new support in the form of Christie, Biomon, and Garudamon. It also got a Quilomon, but we don't play a Quilomon. In my opinion, this deck, it's the top end is just not great. Like I don't think your low end is that bad actually at this point. And you have a lot of red tamers. The issue is really just your payout. It's not super stellar, and like yeah, you get a Warp Evo, and like now you can like get into like Marsmon on your second stack. That's nifty. But it's really not doing very much. Your best way to play this deck is still as an OTK style of deck, but at that point you're just playing War Greymon X, but like worse. So to me, this is just a tier 3 deck. And then you do have Crossheart. Crossheart as a deck, this was a deck that performed very well in the BT11 format, post ban list, even pre ban list, really. But it hasn't seen results since BT12, since EX4, right? It hasn't done anything very much. And the reason why is, well, number one, we're playing into Ruin mode, or just really, what I would say might be like Hunters and BLs might be the biggest issues that Crossheart had faced throughout this formats, right? Hunters was so much more memory efficient. Beelzemon puts you on like a much faster timer than it could put them. So those two decks weren't helping its case. And going into BT13, I mean, you have Ruin Mode. Ruin Mode more or less turns off a lot of your plays. You have Mirage Galgamon with all its bouncing. And Crossheart is a deck that, it can go pretty hard on the plussing, which feeds into Mirage Galgamon. War Greymon style of decks are really strong, so Hades Force is, problematic. And yeah, I mean, you just have a whole slew of new decks that can deal with Crossheart pretty effectively. So not sure how you feel about this. And before I actually pass this off really quick, last thing I want to mention, Hunters is literally just Crossheart, but much more memory efficient. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Um. Please unban crosswalk. No,
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 no.
no, no,
It's,
no,
it's
no,
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 no. It's fine.
no.
It's fine. But
I,
I do think that even if you unban cross 4, this deck would not be a problem.
yeah, it might just become Rookie Rush at that point. We'll see. We'll see.
Which is fine because Wiki Rush as a deck is kind of invalidated,
Yeah, it's non-existent
right?
at this point.
Right. So I mean, I honestly think with the way the game is right now, X4 looping is not that unhealthy
That's fair.
because there's like I feel like there's enough answer in the game.
Yeah. And then, do you want to, lead us off with Hunters?
Yeah. So this is another deck that. So to start off the discussion, this deck, I always wonder why it fell off in Japan. Because on paper, it didn't get any worse, right? Like the deck is still very solid. It did everything. Everything it does is still well. It's not honestly. It's not really slower than the new BT13 decks. So my thought process going into testing is I wonder if there's just like a really doomed matchup that's keeping this deck from seeing play. And after seeing it being tested to a bunch of different decks for like 2 weeks, it doesn't really lose anything. It does not auto lose to any deck in the game. Like I just can't think of anything, right? Like it has like maybe one matchup that's is like slightly unfavored into, but that's also putting a lot of ass on that specific deck, which we will get to draw all of his pieces that it can't grab off of searches to win the matchup. So I'm kind of what's your thought on it? Like I'm wondering why do you think Japan just dropped this deck?
Honestly, it's boring. Hunters is a really boring deck. Nobody wants to play this deck in tournament just because it doesn't do anything flashy. Like you play Tamers and then you get to superior mode and you just win the game. With all that being said, I think Hunters is a really strong deck. Like I think this is like a deck that's in the running for like best deck in the format, right? Because Hunter's Tuck, really nothing can stop that. Like your best case is just not playing a second body or tamer, but then you're feeding into Hunter's Wincon where they're slowing down the game state. They have so much chip that they can do. They're a fantastic deck at abusing Quartzmon, and we all know just how powerful Quartzmon really is. Not to mention, one difference between our format and the Japanese format is that we will have the Ace cards, specifically Melga Ace, and Melga Ace is a pretty nice little bump up for Hunters, because now with Superior Mode can evolve into Melga Ace. So what you can end up doing is Superior Mode Tuck, and then Evo Melga Ace for basically 0, and then swing and then pop something, and you've essentially removed 2 bodies in a single turn, which is something that Hunters kind of struggled with previously. Into the Mirage Galgamon matchups, you also can use Melga Ace to keep your hand size low enough to deny them any of their Mirage Galgamon value, and there's a slew of other things really that you can do. Your bad matchup is, of course, Hades Force style, tamer removal style of decks, but a lot of those decks, it requires them to draw the unsearchable option, right? And you could say like, okay, but BT8 Black War Greymon, well, if you play Hunters enough, you'll learn that you can be very efficient about it. You can manage your resources properly to not get as blown out by the tamer removal as like certain other decks. Another factor I think goes into Hunters is the skill ceiling. This is a very skill intensive deck actually. On paper, play Tamers swing a superior mode doesn't sound that complicated, but the complicated part comes in the form of its resource management. Because if you commit a little too hard, or if you commit the wrong resources, then you're going to find yourself in a really bad position later on into the game. So Hunters is not only a boring deck, but it's one that takes a lot of skill to pilot in comparison with some of these other decks.
Yeah, I agree to all that point.
Mm-hmm.
So I also think like some of your matchup, some of your worst like winnable matchup, even though they're kind of not as good, the way that you would play into them is very unintuitive.
Right.
So yeah, it's just like I think on average, so I think this deck is tier 1, but I think on average this deck is gonna perform like a high tier 2 decks in the ranking.
I to its credit as well, Hunters is also one, like if not the most memory efficient deck in the format. It just does everything for an absurdly low amount of memory, which is not a lot of decks can really do that. But yeah, I do agree that I don't think a lot of people will end up playing Hunters because it's boring. You're tired of seeing this deck after all of BT12 and EX4. But that being said, I think this deck is absolutely phenomenal. It's tested insanely well. You could say like, oh, what about Ruin Mode? Doesn't Ruin Mode stop the deck? Dracmon makes all of your level 4s 6,000 DP, so you're actually over the Ruin Mode threshold on average. So it's another thing going.
That is so funny.
It is really funny. But moving forward, we do have Red Hybrid, and Red Hybrid. Personally, I don't like Red Hybrid. It's a deck that didn't do well into BLs. It absolutely got stomped by Machine Dramon. It didn't do well into Hunters on average because of the memory efficiency. Like I didn't like Red Hybrid, but it performed. It performed pretty well. So to its credit, Red Hybrid I think is a solid tier 2 deck because it's a deck where its early game aggro really is unmatched. I can't name a single other deck in the format that has an equal amount of aggression that this deck can provide, right? And it's not only that, but it's consistent aggression, right? Because like with Jasmine, yeah, Jasmine can deal 3 damage, amass a board on turn 2, but it's very piece reliant. This, on the other hand, it's not a lot to ask for to get off the ground running and start chipping out your opponent very quickly. So, to its credit, I think that's pretty good for it. But another thing that you have to consider is number one, bouncing is really problematic. Bouncing makes it so you lose a lot of your inherents. Ruin mode is really detrimental to this deck because it makes it so you your level 4s are a lot weaker. Decks like Blim Lord Hunters, where they can abuse Quartzmon, is also very problematic. So, in my opinion, I think Red Hybrid is a tier 2 deck for its aggression alone. What do you think?
I think this deck issue is that it's way too fair for a degenerate aggro deck.
Yeah.
Like, it's supposed to be like super hyper aggro, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what I've noticed a number of times is a lot of times you're actually unable to kill the turn that you put them to 0.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you do your evolution, and sometimes you have enough memory to play like 1 Atomic Inferno, and then you do like 2 checks, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in theory, you're supposed to get your 2 memory back, and then like do another hybrid to win the game. But there's so many scenarios where you don't have a secondary tamer available,
Right.
or like you just don't have the other piece, and it's just really awkward. It's just like it has a really hard time closing out games, from what I've noticed.
Yeah, and I definitely do agree to that. But moving forward, do you want to lead us on Black Warg?
Sure. So Black Greenmon, this is another deck that actually surprised me in testing. So let's get it out of the way. It's in tier 1, right? But we've been testing this deck quite a bit, and its performance is surprising to me because I didn't think it'd be as good as it is after seeing War Greymon struggle through all BT12 format. But in testing, from what we saw, this deck has the ability to deal with almost like every other deck in the game.
Mm-hmm.
It has tools to deal with almost every scenario. Like into Royal Knights, you have access to BT8 Metal Gray,
Raid.
and you have Raid. Yeah. You can just like constantly remove their Bora. Into like BL, you can pressure their you can remove their tamers, so you remove the value they get off of Kurata. It's just, I don't know, it's just like a really solid deck. You have access to DP protection, bounce protection. It just does everything. The main issue though that's keeping this deck from being best deck in format, in my opinion, is kinda piece reliant.
Mm-hmm.
And Digimon being a 50 card deck limitation, meaning that I guess its problem is that it has too many good cards.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't fit all of those good cards, so you end up having to like play 1 or 2 of each of his top end. And there's games where you just can't find them. And then like some of the really important cards like Hades Force is not searchable. So deck will get better with memory boost. With training boost probably because of that aspect. Wait, no, training boost doesn't grab option, does it?
It does. It
does? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So training boost grabbing option will help you a lot in that sense. So, although with that said, it's still very good. I think it's just being able to answer most decks. Just give you. I think there's a very flexible deck, and we'll probably see a decent amount of result in tournaments.
Yeah. So like you said, it is anti-DP protect. Or it has DP protection against Shine. It has bounce protection against Mirage. And to Mirage, if they go for a restand, you can pop them unless they play out an extra body. But that's asking them to commit additional memory for their combo. And to Hunters, you do have that Tamer removal, which puts them a little bit on an awkward position. Like in theory, Black War Greymon has all the tools to beat what's in tier 1. But like you said, it has to draw the correct piece to deal with the correct deck. In the current state of Digimon, there are like 5 different prominent forms of removal, and that Black War Greymon has answers to all of these decks, but the issue is you need to draw the specific piece of protection or specific card to deal with that specific deck. And so you're spreading. You find yourself spreading the deck a little bit thin, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's where the weakness of Black War Greymon comes from, is that you want to do X, but you also need to cover Y and Z, you know? But Black War Greymon, focus specifically, I think is really good. Which also goes to lend itself, like, we talked a lot about Tier 1 and, like, it being piece reliant. By far the most consistent deck in Tier 1 is Hunters, right? I don't think anyone's going to argue that. Hunters is, like, stupid consistent, because all you really need is, like, one Tamer and you can pop off from there, right? So, in testing, Hunters was consistently seeing its line of play, and the other decks, like, they had to spend a little bit of time digging at times. So, personally, with this Tier 1, and it's not to say we won't add anything else, but at the current moment with this Tier 1, between Mirage and Hunters, I think either or could be BDIF.
Right.
And then War Greymon, right? The difference between War Greymon and Black War Greymon is that I think Black War Greymon is more suited to deal with the current meta than War Greymon is. Specifically, like War Greymon Toolbox, right? Because focusing on the Black War Greymon aspect, I think gives you a much better edge into these meta decks than, say, focusing on the Raid War Greymon aspect. So, to that, I think this is, I think Greymon Toolbox is like a Tier 2 deck, but I think focusing on the Black War Greymon aspect is going to get you much further. And then, moving on, we do have Ulforce, and I don't know what to tell y'all. This deck is not that great right now. Mirage is just better Ulforce, frankly. You lose to DP minus, you lose to balance, you lose to getting tucked, you lose to Tamer removal, you lose to Quartzmon. All 5 things I listed are present in all of the top decks in the format. Yeah, I don't know. Like there are a couple people in the Hoang Zero Discord that are trying to cope this deck, like Nerd and Iona Rose.
Why do you hate Jambo?
Jambo too, right? But it's not going well from what I can tell. You get a new Ulforce, you get a level 7 that's searchable and via Mirage Burst, but that only gets you really so far. But sometimes you can OTK people, like Mirage. So yeah, Tier 3. Anything you want to add there?
Why play this blue deck when you can play Blue Dog?
This is true. Yeah, the Blue Dog will always find its way into my nightmares. Anywho, so moving on, we do have Machinedramon. And Machinedramon is a deck similar to Black War Greymon, has a lot of tools to deal with the current meta, right? Into Mirage, you have Bounce Protection. Into Shine, you have DP Protection via EX1 Machinedramon. Versus Black War Greymon, if they're not focusing on a D-Digivolve package, you can D-Digivolve them quite a fair amount to make it very awkward for them. Into Hunters, if both players are 50-50 in skill level, it's Hunter's favored. But if the Machinedramon player is aware of like the matchup or better, then what can happen is the Machinedramon player can actually swing it in their favor. This requires you to be on 3 Megadramon, 3 blocker, hard mulligan for those blockers, and play off that. It's not intuitive. It's not an intuitive way to play whatsoever. But it's definitely a very doable matchup. So you hypothetically into all 4 decks in Tier 1, you do pretty well. So where does the issue lie? And the issue, in my opinion, lies in the fact that, number 1, Mirage Galgamon can ignore blocking because BT13 block Galgamon. 2, if you don't see your specific pieces like the EX1 Machinedramon, then Shine Greymon's going to fold you. 3, like I mentioned, both Hunters and Black War Greymon have the tools necessary to beat you in. And 4, Quartzmon is a problem because your out to Quartzmon is heavy mobile or having a Chaosdramon X usually, and if you do that, I just hope they don't have another Quartzmon, but if they do, then you're kind of like, go next, right?
And I think one other thing that kind of hurts it a little bit is like EX1 Machinedramon is not that good of a card, right? Like ideally you want to a lot of times you better just evolving into like BT11 Machinedra instead, right? And in order to deal with Shine, you have to run higher count of the EX1 Machinedramon for DP protection,
right?
Because nothing else has DP minus protection, so that hurt you in a lot of ways too. So either you run lower count and you risk getting exposed and just getting your stack destroyed by DP minus, or you run like a mediocre card.
Right. Okay, and then you want to do BLs?
Yeah, sure. So, really interesting, this deck was the terror of the meta before it got hit. And in many ways, it's still, they didn't really hit the most problematic card in the deck, which is BL's X, right? So it's still really strong in that sense, but The issue with this deck, as anyone who plays it knows, is sometimes you just open poorly and your mill goes wrong. So you're like 2 turns behind your kill turn because you just didn't mill correctly. And before the hit, because you had 4 EXQM, the chances you hitting one is pretty high. So you can just randomly mill into an EXQM and just kind of solve all your problem by milling into all the other correct pieces, and you start chaining off from there, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have that luxury anymore. A lot of the times now, where if you just don't mill that well early game, you actually just very slow on getting to your kill turn. So this deck, before we kill on turn 3, turn 4, now sometimes it would kill like turn 5, 6, even later than that.
Yeah.
If you just mill, you can't control RNG. So
Right.
it's just that's one aspect of the deck. And this also has like some pretty poor matchup. Like this deck gets slaughtered by Machine Dramon,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of not great into Black War Greenmon,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
So one thing I think is really interesting is we were watching some gameplay earlier this afternoon, and like I said, if you guys want to come see some BT13 gameplay, be sure to stop by the Hoang Zero server. The link is down below in the description. It was Beelzemon versus Shine Greymon, and Beelzemon was contesting it like pretty like fairly well, right? Which either goes to show Beelz is still really good, or Shine Greymon is not all that gassed up as it is to be. Me taking shots at Shine Greymon aside, I think Beelzemon is still a really good deck. It has really strong removal. It has the ability to sometimes just pop off out of nowhere. Beelzemon X is still a really dumb card. Like I think this is still a very high tier 2 deck at the end of the day.
Right.
But
I think it's probably the best of the two.
Yeah, and I think there's an argument you could make there, but if it's not the best, it's like the second best at the bare minimum. It's really good.
It easily contests all the other. I think it has so much advantage over most of the other teacher decks. That's like one other deck you can make some argument for, but like they're pretty neck and neck in terms of being how good they are.
Yeah, for sure. And next we do have Royal Knights, and Royal Knights is a deck that I'm personally very excited for. I'm literally buying an entire case of Digimon just to play Royal Knights, actually. So, Yggdrasil was the deck with I believe that the second or third, I want to say the third best performance in Japanese BT13 across the board. And this deck, its win con is very, it's straightforward. Get to Omnimon and, win the game. It's almost reminiscent of D-Reaper, right? It's just D-Reaper 2.0. The issue with Yggdrasil that I have found is that it's very fair into a lot of decks. And what I mean by that is there's no... as far as the tier 1 decks go, you don't beat any of them. You either go even or you lose to them. And your game plan is also, by nature, very slow. So there's a couple of things. So number one, Mirage Galgamon matchup is usually 50-50. And you can use the Alphamon to like stall out the game and whatnot, and that's really good. But there is a caveat to this in the form of like sometimes they just OTK you, and there's not a lot you can do there. Hunters, on paper you would think like, oh well, hunters they're so like low DP, all of their stacks are gonna die. Like my huge security is gonna do me really well here. And the reality is they're so memory efficient that you just don't get a lot of resource to play the game with, and so you're passing over a lot on average. Which is why I've gone ahead and bumped up my memory tamer count to 4 in my Yggdrasil decks. Black War Greymon and Shine Greymon are able to remove your stacks very consistently. And then you have decks like really just anything that can remove your stacks. Like, to be honest, like I think Beelzemon could even give you a run for your money, assuming you're not on your Alphamon and Craniumon spam states. But yeah,
unironically, I tested Gallant into this, and Gallant can smack this deck because they're so efficient at removal.
Yeah,
like you just get either raided into, or one of your Royal Knight would just randomly get popped, and or they'll wipe your sister plus your Omedamon board. It's just so funny, like how often this deck just loses pieces.
And to its credit, this is it's not an intuitive deck. You don't look at this deck and know like, oh, this game plan is super simple. No, like this deck does have a bit of a skill curve to it, almost similar to Hunters in the sense of like resource management and whatnot. But you're basically just trying to like keep afloat while you're trying to get to your Omnimon win con. And realistically, outside of like the best decks in the format, you beat most decks like in tier 2 or lower. It's very difficult for most decks to actually deal with like all the Gallantmons, all the Alphas, the Cranias, even the Omnis, right?
Yep.
I think Yiggy is like a high tier 2 because, records show it was a pretty damn good deck in BT13. I just think in our English version of BT13, it'll struggle a little bit, and it'll also not have a lot of results to back it up, partially due to the price barrier. Yggdrasil is like a $300 plus deck, right? Because you have to pay for your Omnis and your Gallantmons, right?
Yep.
So I think this price barrier is going to keep a lot of people from actually playing this deck, which it's really fun. So that's unfortunate, but moving forward, we do have Leopardmon, and Leopardmon to me is like Blim Lord. That's slightly more aggressive, but with a constraint to it, and that constraint is it requires your opponent to have a card on board. If your opponent doesn't have a Digimon on board, it's swinging for 1 damage every swing. You restand, you get like 1 restand guaranteed, and then the rest of the restands, you need the memory to actually like afford to the bodies to do that, and that in of itself comes with its own slew of issues. You're not doing enough damage. You're susceptible to board wipes. All the issues that Blim Lord suffers from, Leopardmon also suffers from, which is not fantastic. So, to me, Leopardmon is just Blim Lord light in a lot of different ways. So, not a huge fan of it, but it's a deck that has a lot of potential going forward into the future.
Let me ask this.
Okay.
I've seen some gameplay of it. Do you think a world where this thing might maybe bottom tier 2? Because it still has the ability to just win games.
I think having the issue of relying on your opponent to play the game and also being very susceptible to board wipe, I think keeps it out of tier 2 personally. Into decks like BLs, I mean, BLs are just going to dismantle your board, or they're going to just outright kill you. If you ever play into Blim Lord, you're fundamentally just playing against a better version of yourself. Into Shine Greymon, they have enough removal. Into Arrestor Dramon or Hunters, right?
Fair enough. I believe you.
Okay. Okay, and you want to do the next one?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. So this is Tesro infamous Mill Loop.
Mm-hmm.
What to say about it? I mean, you want to see this deck and see it being pilot, and all the way all the tech and all the way to build it. Go to Tesro channel.
Yeah.
He's master of purple. With that said, this deck is tier 3. It's so tier 3.
Yeah.
It's you have matchup that you all lose to, like BLs, obviously. Like this deck cannot beat BLs. It's impossible. But on top of that, I think the new decks. I guess you're kind of. How do you think this deck does into Yggdrasil?
So, into Yggdrasil, I mean, you might be okay into that deck actually.
Yeah, you're probably okay into Yggdrasil. You're probably okay into Belf. So it's not like it doesn't have matchup that it can beat. The issue is that all the tier 1 decks will probably just beat your ass, right?
So I think really quick. So currently, right now in EX4, it's seeing a decent amount of success because outside of Beelzemon, which again is an auto lose matchup, the rest of the decks are fairly slow, right? You have Machine Dramon and you have Hunters, and both of them have they need time to set up, right? So it gives you enough time to actually get your milling off. But BT13, the decks are so much faster. Burst mode as a mechanic is just insanely fast, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that ends up keeping Lilith or Mill Loop down a bit, just because it's not fast enough to deal with these new decks.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I think that's it about it.
Yeah.
Moving on, we have the other burst mode, the last burst mode.
It's not the last one.
The last relevant burst mode
There you go.
introduced
There you
in
go.
the set. Okay, so we have Rosemon. Now, initially, when I saw this deck, my thought process is maybe this deck can, and even with the future support, right? Maybe this deck can mitigate some of the issue that Blim Lord has, which is Blim Lord. The way it played the game is that it kind of have to establish itself on board, and then you just get board remove, and then you're very sad. Green player problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
But and this deck is supposed to be kind of OTK-ish single stack deck, but the issue is that it doesn't OTK is one, and the other issue is that too many of your cards require your opponent to have something on board.
Mm-hmm.
So then you just run into the Gallant problem, like, hey, my game plan doesn't work because you didn't play a body, and that just kind of sucks.
Yeah, for sure.
So although I do think it's much better than Leopard, so I'll
Yeah,
give it that.
I agreed. I do think it's better than Leopard. And to its credit, Burst Mode Rose is really good. So that's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
I think Rose Burst Mode, there's a lot of argument to replace it, to replace Quartz with it in some of these decks. So, I mean, something to consider. It's a good card.
Yeah, for sure. Being able to abuse Rosemon Burst Mode does give you a little bit of a niche in the format, but you make the argument that Blim Lord can also just play Rosemon in of itself and just Burst Mode for free as well in that deck because you can run Yoshino. It's pretty easy. But like you said, not having the ability to interact with your opponent is kind of a detriment. So moving on, we do have Alphamon, and Alphamon is a deck that is testing pretty well for the most part. It does have its fair share of issues, for one being the lack of damage, but I would say Alphamon is the most consistent deck in the format just across the board. Cool Boy searches your entire deck. You have both Dorumon and Ryutamon, as well as BT9 Dorumon. So all three rookies are consistency boosters. You have access to Coda, Black Memory Boost. Like, you have so much consistency in this deck that it's kind of ridiculous. I got an entirely new line of support from 3, 4, 5, and 6. And 6 is really good, as well as its 5. It has anti DP, so it's a pretty good Shine Greymon matchup. You can stop Mirage Galgamon from swinging out. You have D-Digivolve. Like, you have a lot of tools actually at your disposal. I think what ends up gating Alphamon from being a better deck is going to be the lack of damage that I just mentioned, is because your only source of additional damage is Sunarizamon and the one of Dora Greymon. But with that being said, you're going to double swing for 2 damage. I mean, that's just not a lot. So I think with that as the end result, I think Alphamon, it's like mid-highish tier 2. Probably say like slightly below, like in the same tier as Jasmine, if not slightly below. Because like its ceiling is a lot less, but damn, its consistency is good.
Yeah, I think the issue is that the core issue is that Doro Greymon got hit to 1.
Yeah.
And none of the new cards got is remotely anywhere near as good as Doro Greymon. So, yeah. You have access to like Sunariza and stuff like that, but like Alphamon Oyukin is just really not that good of a card in this particular build, in my opinion, because it's like it is meant to be a kill card, right? And this deck doesn't really kill. So like after you go into Oyukin, your kit's kind of boneless. It just kind of sit there.
Yeah.
So it's until they get more cards. That's just the way this deck is gonna be.
Right, and then we do have Belphamon. And Belphamon was one of the best performing decks in the Japanese format for BT13. And it's a deck that does pretty well, right? Not being able to affect the sleep mode, most decks aren't able to deal with that, right? Most decks will flat out just lose to that. It has a pretty simple and straight up insane board wipe. Rage mode plus Karada will dismantle almost any board in the game. It's really good. It's a very good deck. But it has its own fair of weaknesses. One, your Mirage Galgamon matchup is very bad because they actively hinder your game plan because you want to be at less cards. You want to be at no cards in hand. And then they're like, oh no, keep drawing cards. Like, I want you to play the game. So that sucks. So they're actively playing against your win condition. Number 2, you're not the most consistent deck in the format by any means. You're to a degree, you're pretty piece reliant, right? Because you need a line, you need your Gizus, and then you also need both sleep and rage.
Yeah, I was gonna say you need specifically both of your level 6,
right? And
like your game plan can fall apart sometimes just because you're not seeing one.
Exactly. So if you don't have both sleep and rage and trash, the deck's pretty boneless. So I don't know what else do you want to add to Belphamon?
I mean, it's a really cool deck.
Yeah.
I love the way they designed this deck. It's just something like completely different. Even the way it plays is different. And the Gizu line, the way that it just kill your very flavorful deck. Like the Gizu line killing your eggs and stuff like that. Really cool deck. Just not quite there.
Yeah. Fun fact, I learned this the other day. Did you know that none of the Gizumon arts are actually from the show? They're all original art that is drawn in the same style as the show to replicate it. Same for the D Reaper. Little fun tidbit for people.
Okay, that's neat.
Yeah.
We could have claimed no anime art until BT14.
Yeah. Well, technically, starter deck 15 and 16. Okay. But
Man,
yeah.
I hate those. I hate that those
Ah,
options are playable.
yeah, I hate those too. They're good. They're really good. They just look ugly.
Yeah, I'm saying I hate that they're good. I have to play them.
Yeah. But yeah, so Belhamon, the way it plays, the amazing board removal that it has a lot of these tools going for it. But I think with Mirage Galgamon likely to be best deck in the format and also being very popular, I think it falls a little short of tier 1 and it probably falls into tier 2. And then finally, we get to your favorite deck. Whoa. You want to kick this one off?
What to say? I got baited by Bandai, man. EX4, they introduced Ravemon, and Ravemon is such a cool deck. It was so awesome, right? You do your whole combo, your stack dice, you analog, get your turn back, you have a floating level 6, now you build a second stack, and just go off, right? Like, really fun deck. Wasn't quite there because there's missing pieces, missing a line, but like, very promising deck. Almost there. BT13 get announced, and it's like, oh man, Raven's getting burst mode. This is it. This will be the day. And then you read all the support for Raven in BT13, and you just start crying a little bit inside because why is the entire line of support for this deck in this set all focused around discarding your opponent hand? Discarding, like, focusing effect on removing your opponent hand is so weak in Digimon. Digimon decks all draw like a million cards. So discarding as an effect needs to be tacked on something else, otherwise it's completely irrelevant. And on top of that, for some reason they decided, let's give Burst Mode one of the worst removal effect in the game. Why does Burst Mode Rave removal require for me to remove something of the same name from their trash to bot deck? Like, in what world does that make sense? Why isn't it even like the same level? It's a purple card. Why wouldn't you just make it the same level? Why does it have to be named? But yeah, this deck is garbage. It's tier 3.
You know, it's funny because they printed Mirage Galgamon Burst Mode in the same set, and Mirage Galgamon Burst Mode is just, it's Ravemon Burst Mode, but infinitely better.
Yeah.
So yeah, this deck is pretty. Unfortunately, it's pretty garbage, but like it's probably more playable garbage than some of this other garbage. So to its credit,
it's still garbage. Like, oh my, they really needed a good level 7
for sure. And then
like, it doesn't have a way to win the game.
Right, and then we do have Ultra-S. And Ultra-S, it's weirdly enough performing in Japan right now. It's doing pretty well in Japan. But
because of the training boost?
Because of the training boost, right? You end up playing 4 memory boosts, 4 training boosts, and that increases your consistency a fair amount. Because Ultra-S is a deck, it's not like it was... The top end is bad. Your top end is actually very good. The issue is just getting to the top end, which 90% of games, you don't get to the top end. So with training boost, it's a pretty huge buff to the deck. But until we get to that training boost, you're kind of just in a really awkward position. So I would say this is, unfortunately, like a tier 3 deck. I think it's better than Ravemon, personally, but that's not a high bar to break. So, and then we do have the Pawn Chessmon deck. And this is a deck that I think is really fun. It's really cool, because the whole gimmick is you play Digimon, and then Digimon spawns out tamers. Specifically, the Pawn Chessmon tamer. I think it's like Miki and Nikki or something like that. I don't actually remember. Miki, and then you also have BT13 Keenan, right? And so the play is you have the Pawn Chessmon on your board, the one that summons on your opponent's turn, and you use Sephirothmon or Lapilus's Demon. You force your opponent to swing into you, and then they swing. You block with the Pawn Chessmon, and the Pawn Chessmon on deletion plays another Pawn Chessmon, and then you proc all your tamers, and you gain like 3 or 4 memory, and then your opponent literally just doesn't get to play the game. It's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool concept. It's just, it suffers from a lot, like consistency issues, from not having like a win con that doesn't rely on your opponent. It doesn't stop getting OTK'd. Like if you get bounced, the world sucks. Bot deck, like yeah, it's not stellar. It's at least better than Dark Knightmon. I'll give it this format. Actually, is it? It might be worse than Dark Knightmon.
No, it's probably worse. Yeah.
Yeah, it might be worse than Phoenixmon too. While we're at it, it's not good, but it's really fun. It's a very funny deck. It's a very fun deck. You want to do the next one?
Yes. What to say? Yellow for the first time in a very long while. How many set has it been that Yellow got a dedicated Yellow only line of support that isn't tied to some other color, right?
Well, we got Shine Greymon in EX4. We got Shine Greymon in BT12. We got Maste in BT11.
Shine Sapphire.
Yeah, and I'm saying like how long has it been? BT10 is the last time, and that was Venusmon.
Right. And so Yellow got its own dedicated line and its own dedicated mechanic. Too bad they just got the worst keyword in the game.
Yeah, barrier.
Barrier is so bad.
Burn security and stop battle destruction. Yeah.
Why couldn't they just stop destruction? Period. Why does this specifically battle destruction? It's such a bad mechanic.
Yeah, it's not really great. But to its credit, Kentorosmon is a good card.
Yeah, Kentorosmon is a good card because the card doesn't have to whip barrier on it at all.
This is true. It just happens to be in a terrible, terrible deck.
Yeah, I think it's good enough to flex into other decks though.
Yeah,
I can see like a bunch of yellow decks potentially just play this card as like because it does provide a form of pressure and removal, right?
Yeah.
You can it's like this is the first card since BT4 War Greenmon for yellow that's able to swing twice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so and it's chunky, it's 13. So and you also get like minus DP. Essentially for the same cost as the War Greymon, even though you don't get the draw. So it's neat in that sense, and you can evolve it for 2 if you have low enough security.
Yeah. Okay.
So tier 3 deck.
Yeah, for sure. And then do you want to do Mastemon?
Yes. Masaman's interesting. So I was talking to Vincent about it, and this deck actually got a really good like they got a significant amount of good cards this set, right? Like you got the new Geo Greymon, which is huge with this deck because Geo allow you to just like cheat out a TK or a Mirai from security early, so that's huge. It got Kudamon. Kudamon is one of the biggest additions to the deck. It doesn't seem like a lot, but Kudamon being able to grab all of your yellow, basically, and then also your yellow tamers, and your Mirai, basically, is such a huge boon. Because if you ever play Master, one of the issue with the deck is like a lot of times you're stuck in a situation when you're missing pieces, right? And your decision line comes down to, do I evolve the one Gado I have in hand to try and just draw, but then not lose it, or do I slam the Gado on board and potentially lose it to dig deeper for pieces, right? Kuda fixes that issue by removing that decision tree entirely, because now you can just slam the Kuda and evolve the Gado in the back, which is huge for the deck. So, really great card. Kentoros, as we mentioned earlier, is also a potential flex spot in the deck as like a one-off where you can allow you to generate more pressure. If especially Master can get pretty low in security sometimes. So getting to that 6 security threshold, like you can like potentially do Master Joker's play, swing for 2 security, and then like evolve into Kentoros without passing to him.
Well, more importantly than Kentoros is you can stack a Degrade or you can stack a Hellscythe that's defending, right?
And I was getting to that point too.
Yeah.
Like you can use Kentoros to stack a security effect. So deck like Master is almost like 50% security control anyways with the amount of bombs that you run. So it's good in that sense too. So just really solid cards for it. With all that said, it's 2-2.
Yeah.
It's still so while Kudamon is great, it presents one issue for the deck is that until BT14, what rookies do you run along with Kudamon?
You have Pillowmon, and you can run Bushiagumon as your rush target. But there's one more card that you did mention, and I do want to touch on because it's one of the other contributing factors as to why I would put this in a tier 2. Because otherwise, with everything listed, I'd say this would still be tier 3. What I think pushes it even slightly over the tier 2 line is Melga Ace. This deck does have access to Melga Ace, so you can go like the Maste combo, play Lucemon for free, and then that Lucemon can go Melga Ace. So you have another form of like disruption. What's up?
Oh yeah, I was gonna mention Mega Ace near the end because I
Oh,
do
okay.
think Mega Ace introduction into the game is something that gonna make this format completely different for us
Mm-hmm.
than Japan, and it's gonna whoop the format a little bit. I don't know how much it's gonna whoop the format, but I do think it's gonna have some impact, some pretty significant
So
impact.
to my knowledge, only hunters and Moste can really abuse that card. But maybe somebody brings Melga back into the forefront using Melga Ace. Would be
Be
would,
interesting.
would be very interesting to see. And then hey, these last two decks are all you, man. Let's hear it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this is a really cool deck because also today, I don't know, as the day of recording, we got a new announcement. There is going to be a Terriermon advanced deck being Terry and Lopmon, a double Typhoon advanced deck being introduced to Digimon. So on that note, we're gonna add back to our best friend from EX4, the Alliance deck back to the tier list, right? Now, you may say, hey, Alliance not that good. Well, yes, true. Hear me out. It did get one very significant card, in my opinion, in BT13, which is the new Examon, right? So, if you don't know, in 13 they got new Examon that is 4 costs from green or blue level 6, and it says on play and on Digivolve, suspend one of your opponent Digimon. It doesn't unsuspend, and then your secondary effect is when you suspend an opponent Digimon, or when an opponent Digimon becomes suspended, you can either suspend another one or unsuspend. Now, this is actually really significant for the deck because the issue that Alliance deck had is that you didn't really have a good top end. You kind of go into Cherubi, and that's just kind of it, right? Well, what Exile allow you to do is now you can not only do your Alliance swing, the condition for all the Terramon actually allow you to evolve into Exile for 2. So you're able to push damage and then evolve Exile without passing turn, and Exile will provide you with that extra damage and also with board control. So it's really good in that sense because a lot of times with this deck is that it suffered the same issue as Red Hybrid in that you can sometimes get your opponent to 0 security, but you don't have a way to do a kill shot. And Extra allow you to do that kill shot. So, on that note, I'm glad you already put it in tier 3.
I haven't even moved it yet, but yeah, no.
Oh, okay. I thought you put it in tier 3.
No, I haven't even touched it yet. But yeah,
But
it's cool in concept. I think it's very nifty. I think what ends up happening, obviously Alliance hasn't really done anything in the current format. It's a cool aggro deck. But yeah, we're really just waiting to see the new Terriermon and Lopmon advanced deck, because if it's similar power level to Beelzemon, then we're about to have like tier 0 Terrier Terror,
man, can you imagine getting your ass beat by Terramon?
Alright, I'm ready. Here's the effect. On swing, burn 2 security. Also, warp Digivolve into Mega Gargomon. Mega Gargomon, on swing, burn 3 security. It's really, really well designed.
Yeah.
Alright.
Will we finally have a playable Mega Gargomon?
Okay, to be fair, the very first Mega Gargomon was playable. That was a good card
Oh,
for the
you
time.
know what? I forgot.
That was a very good card for the time.
Okay. All right.
All right, and last but not least, your favorite, the equivalent of my Jasmine, your Gallantmon. Let me hear it.
I mean, I think you guys at this point have heard me talk about this deck a million times, right? The new stuff doesn't fix the issue it has. Same issue, same problems, same everything. It loses to everything in tier 1. It does beat some stuff in tier 2. I actually think you have the ability to contest BLs. Now that is slower. Like the matchup is no longer doomed. You can actually win that matchup with Gallant. You can beat Yggdrasil.
Yeah, you beat Bloom.
You have the you have the ability to. So you do have the ability to. Can you clear BL? I actually don't remember if you can clear BL. Yeah.
No, because it's unaffected.
Yeah, you can raid into it.
You cannot. Can you raid into it?
Yeah, you can. Ray is a mechanic
Oh,
that
okay, okay.
is, yeah, it should be legal. But other than that, yeah, it's like very teach you.
Okay. So I need you to tell me here because I watched you play this in a Mirage Galgamon and you got throttled. I watched you play in the
I,
War Greymon and you got throttled.
yeah, you lose to all the tier 1 decks because the deck weakness is decks that can OTK from raising and not having to play bodies. So I lost to 2 decks that could OTK from raising and didn't have to play bodies. So yeah, what what do you want me to say?
Look,
I
man,
mean,
I need you.
I beat
I need you to sell me on this. Sell me that this is
the
a tier
game.
two deck, not a tier
The
three deck.
game, the game Mirage didn't see Tamer. I was able to kill it. You know, I won.
I had to think back. I was like, did you really? But yeah.
I did. I won the game. When they didn't see Tamer in time, and I won in like it took a little bit,
All
but
right,
I did win.
all right. I'll let you cope. Bottom tier
Okay,
two.
so here's the thing. So here's the thing.
Oh no.
One of the cool thing that you can do with this deck now, because of the new Gallant, is that you can play a more turbo mill variant. So you go back to your EX3 support with the War Growl and the Growlmon, and then like also with the new EX4 support, and you just play all this mill stuff, right? And you just hyper mill until you get your Gallantmon cheap, and you can just slam it for cheap. So that's one good thing. The other thing is that you can, I think Chaos Gallant is actually playable because with the way this deck is built, what you can do is you can like do some really cool stuff. Like my list play 3 analog boy, right? So what I can do is you can go into Magidramon, the XU Magidramon, you bliss with it. You can either remove something, whatever, do the mill 5 for each player. And a turn, you pop the stack, play the Chaos Gallant, you activate Analog Boy, you keep the turn, you evolve a second stack. Not only that, the Magidramon then play a Tocado and a Gilmon off of its effect. Now, you can use that to play a Rush Gilmon and the Memory Tamer Tocado. Use that to biomerge into a new Gallant stack and Bliss off of that. Doesn't that sound cool? That's pretty cool to me.
Yeah, I like losing. Anyway, look, you say tier two, I say tier three. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Bottom tier two, final offer.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, good enough for me. All right, so with that all being said, because it's been almost an hour and 20 minutes, thank you all so much for watching the Hoang Zero tier list. Really do appreciate it. If you guys have any comments or anything you want to talk to us about, feel free to drop it in the comments below. But also make sure you stop by the Hoang Zero Discord server. I think our Discord server has one of the best communities. We have a really great testing community. It's just really great all around. So yeah, be sure to check that out in the link below as well. So
Yeah, if you think we're wrong, come beat us.
that's true. Yeah, come fight. I put Shivamon in tier 3, I think, back in BT8, and somebody told me that they wanted to money match me, and then they never showed up, and I was disappointed because I was trying to clap some Shiva cheek, man.
Come 1v1 me, bro.
Yeah. So thank you all so much for watching. Anything you want to say to the people watching right now?
Yeah, keep on believing, Gallant Bros. We'll get there.
All right. I'm gonna stop this propaganda. All right, peace, everyone. Bye.